There are so many references, Easter eggs, and nods to the wider Warhammer 40,000 lore squeezed into Space Marine 2. In a previous video, I talked about 20 of those fascinating details, and in this video, I'm here to give you 19 more. So let's get into it. One of the details that many of the comments in the previous video were right to point out is the Statue of Sanguinius at the Temple of Thasian. Sanguinius is the Primarch of the Blood Angels, one of the original first founding Space Marine legions, and his statue above the temple is actually based off of the Forge World character series miniature, wielding the Spear of Telesto, thrusting it into a giant demon. There is also more Blood Angels iconography scattered around the area, including winged blood droplets and blood chalices. We don't have all the information on the origin of this temple, but it was obviously very important to the history of the 9th Legion. During one scene, a cultist in disguise detonates a bomb and kills the Ultramarine Varellus. Upon returning to the battle barge, you can walk by his quarters where a dedication has been laid for him, and his battle brothers are sharing stories about the brave sergeant. A nice nod to the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy with the mention of the Tau, but also a humbling dedication to a Space Marine we knew all too briefly, and another great detail showcasing the bond of kinship and brotherhood that Astartes share. Now, have you ever been told off for cursing? How about being told off for cursing by a giant armoured super soldier? While walking by some members of the Astra Militarum, one of the trooper utters, "Emperor's safe," taking the good name of the Emperor in vain, which is overheard by the squad, resulting in this scolding.
"What's your tongue, guardsman?" "My lord, forgive me."
Taking a look at the Ultramarines Thunderhawk, you can see that there is text adorning the front of the craft. This reads, "To a Space Marine, the bolt gun is far more than a weapon. It is an instrument of mankind's divinity, the bringer of death to his foes, whose howling blast is a prayer to the gods of battle." This is a quote from the Ultramarines Primarch Robute Guilliman, as found in the Apocrypha of Skaros, the oldest known surviving copy of the Codex Astartes. But as Vuku Nazevic 2426 points out, this Thunderhawk may actually be the same Thunderhawk Titus rode into battle during the prologue of the original Space Marine, as they both share the same name, the Lance of Jove.
Aye, Captain. Thunderhawk Lance of Jove returning to launch bay.
Lance of Jove, report.
Minor damage. Tech team is inbound.
And tech like Thunderhawks and other vehicles can have some exceedingly long lifespans in the world of Warhammer 40,000. Let's talk about the Adeptus Mechanicus. While exploring the battle barge between campaign missions, you can sometimes hear tech priests speaking in Binaric. This is a language known only to the AdMech, consisting of bursts of static emitted from a tech priest's cybernetic implants, capable of transmitting much more information in a shorter amount of time than using standard language. In one scene, you can see what appears to be two tech priests talking smack about a servitor using their Binaric language to ensure no one overhears their gossip.
Indeed.
When reloading a bolt rifle, if you pause at the right time, you can see the ejected magazines are actually modelled as empty, while fresh ones have visible bolt rounds inside, although there is no way that 25 bolt rounds are fitting into that magazine. Obviously, there's some Mechanicus magic going on there. Be sure to check out our Firearms Expert Reacts episode if you want to see us dive deeper into the details of Space Marine weaponry, but firearms such as the Stalker bolt rifle and the Bolt sniper rifle will have inscriptions written in High Gothic visible in the scope. High Gothic is often represented as a bastardized form of Latin, but if you translate this text, you will get "Death to me is art," which may also refer to one of the Space Marines' pledges.
What is your craft? My craft is death.
Returning to the forces of Tzeentch for a moment, you may have noticed that the Zangors, the Tzeentch-serving savage beastmen, have many avian features, a common visual element for those worshipping Tzeentch. But did you know that the mortal human followers also have their own physical dedications, as some have altered their gas masks and hood to appear as though they have their own beak? While tearing off the helmets of Thousand Sons Marines, you may wonder why instead of gore, they spew forth streams of magic and powder. Well, that is because the Rubric Marines you fight are actually made from dust. You can check out our previous Warhammer 40,000 lore video if you want the full details, but basically this is due to a magic spell gone awry 10,000 years prior. But it's a wonderful visual realization of this piece of Warhammer 40,000 lore. Not everyone is a fan though, as you can catch two Ultramarines discussing their frustration that their arch enemy isn't of physical form, and that fighting suits full of dust rather than flesh just doesn't hit the same.
There is hardly satisfaction in slaying vacant ceramite that does not lament its folly. Give us heretic flesh that we may settle old scores.
I mentioned this in my tips video, but it's also a really cool detail. If you don't keep an eye on Thousand Sun sorcerers, they can actually start reforming the discarded piles of dust and armor back into Rubric Marines. This is actually something that has occurred in the Warhammer lore, but as far as I can tell, it is a tricky ritual to accomplish, involving fetching a soul from the warp and rebinding it to their armor. But the sorcerers in Space Marine 2 don't seem to be having much of an issue with cobbling their marines back together. Also, as UGBoy1 pointed out in the comments of our previous video, executing a Rubric Marine results in showers of sparks and plumes of dust, as I mentioned earlier. However, the sorcerers who control these dusty warriors are still flesh, blood, and bone, which you can see plenty of when delivering the killing blow to the heretical warp users. Waging war against hordes of Tyranids is a tiring affair. Luckily, aboard the Space Marine battle barge, workers and serfs are provided with plenty of coffee or caffeine supplements to keep their energy levels up, or as it's called in 40k, Recaff.
Shifts extended to 22 hours until further notice. Additional Recaff rations will be issued.
In Warhammer 40,000, Astra Militarum Commissars are responsible for troop morale and loyalty, a job most take extremely seriously, as it's not uncommon for them to execute wavering soldiers or inept officers regardless of rank. If you're caught retreating by a Commissar, the last thing you'll likely feel is a last shot in your back. And yet, at the beginning of Machinus Divinitus, as the Astra Militarum battles to hold off Tyranid waves using tanks and emplaced weapons, you can see a Commissar yell, "Hold the line," and then start absolutely booking it, running from the battle. It is extremely rare for a Commissar to show their back to the enemy. Their role requires them to be on the front lines. You could say maybe he's off to deliver a message, but he could command any trooper to be a messenger, and there are surely radios in those Lehman Russ tanks. Unless he's Caiaphas Cain himself, he's going to have some explaining to do. This next Easter egg is actually kinda sad. If you jump back onto one of these platforms, you can find two servitors standing over the body of a deceased tech priest. Servitors are cybernetic fusions of mind-wiped humans and machines. Their purpose is largely for manual labor or simple tasks. Becoming a servitor is a harsh but common punishment for criminals, traitors, and cowards. It appears as though the tech priest in charge of these servitors has perished, and without their commands, it's likely that these servitors will simply stand in place forever, or at least until they're found, rot away, or run out of fuel. Speaking of manual labour though, another individual you can see across the battle barge is this chapter serf, wielding a simple wooden broom. A chapter serf is basically a servant to the Space Marine chapter to whom they serve. It's their job to perform the tasks that support the smooth running of a chapter's vessel or fortress. They could operate machinery, support logistics, act as messengers, or sweep the floor. I just hope that this guy isn't the only one with a broom. Otherwise, he's not finishing sweeping in this lifetime. Such is the weight, bulk, and strength of a Space Marine that they don't even need to fire a bolt gun or swing a chainsword to dispatch lesser foes. Every punch or kick from an Astartes is a weapon of mass destruction. You can actually see this across the campaign when coming up against human cultists. You can simply sprint right through them, turning these heretics into a fine paste under your boots. One of the more harrowing details that really drives home the grimdark nature of Warhammer 40,000 is that prior to meeting the astropath, you can see Psykers throughout the hall formed into an astropathic choir, and being used to amplify the strength of the astropath, essentially using their psychic powers to boost a telepathic signal. Also, you can actually see a few signs of corruption appear here, but most grimly, the falling objects around you are actually the bodies of burned out Psykers, whose minds, souls, bodies, or a combination of all, have been broken by the warp and the stresses of their psychic talents. On a more humorous note though, it may come as a surprise, or perhaps not, that a Space Marines battle barge isn't the safest place to work. When returning from a multiplayer mission, if you look into the launch bay, you may see tech priests working away on a gunship. If you return later though, you may be met with the scene of an unfortunate accident. Hopefully, OSHA doesn't exist in the grimdark far future. You may have been too busy blowing apart the human cultists working alongside the Thousand Suns to notice their suite of weaponry, but they are actually using both heretical las rifles as well as auto guns. The las rifles are similar to the ones used by Astra Militarum allies, but auto guns operate more like modern day firearms, firing a solid round. You can actually tell what you're being shot at by the muzzle flash and the visually distinct tracer rounds and laser bolts. Not that it matters much, as they can but scratch the paint of the powerful Astartes armour. One weapon that is a little more threatening is the Heretic Long Las. This is basically the sniper rifle version of the las rifle, using specialised ammunition known as hotshot, which packs a much bigger punch than your average las gun. If you zoom in on one of these heretical sharpshooters, you can actually see that their weapon model is different from the average troopers, with their sniper rifle being much longer and fitted with an optic. A smaller detail that I appreciated is that during the mission Void Song, a blocked door is forced open by a Chimera armoured transport crashing its way through it. Something the gunner was obviously warned of, as to ensure the vehicle's turret-mounted multi-laser isn't damaged, they turn the barrel 180 degrees away from the door. After all, you have to look after your weaponry if you want them to look after you. Those are 19 more details in Space Marine 2 that I found interesting, and once again, I hope you did too. If there are any secrets or details that you found, or lore tidbits from the game you want to share, leave them in the comment section below and maybe we'll feature them in another future video. And if you want more Space Marine 2 deep dives, be sure to check out our Expert Reacts episodes, where we talk to both a firearms expert and an expert in historical arms and armour. Until next time though, thank you for watching.